Is this an
probabilistic
egocentric
argument.
perspective because we are alive? Is it our perspective of life being far more significant than other things in the universe, like the creation of suns? Is this thing that we have where we're attaching intelligent design to something that may just be a property of the universe itself?
We could say that, except that we know that fine-tuning in our experience does result from mind. It's not just that we're interested in
our experience.
Yeah, in our experience.
But limited experience, right? And
right, but that is the basis of all scientific reasoning.
Right. I understand, but it's not a conclusion based on all the data that could possibly be available.
No, that would be to have that would be a certain proof.
Right.
Okay? And
Do you have in your mind, are you certain?
Am I certain? I have had experiences of God that make me more confident.
Can you tell me those experiences?
Yeah, but can I make an earlier point? Because you're raising, it's awesome the amount of good philosophy you do on this show because of the way you ask questions. And this is the questions you just asked have lead to an answer that is right at the heart of deep philosophical discussions that have been going on for about 500 years. And there was in the Middle Ages there were these attempts to prove God's existence with absolute certainty, and they failed. And in the Enlightenment period, philosophers like Hume and Kant came along. Kant was actually sympathetic to theistic arguments, but he didn't think you could provide absolute proof. But because you couldn't get proof, a trend came in religious thought that was called fideism. You just believed for no reason at all. You believe in belief alone. I have faith in faith alone. And you got figures like Kierkegaard who believed that you could know God, but you knew it entirely. You knew God entirely subjectively, and you just had to take a leap of faith. There was no rational basis for it. I think there's a middle way between those two extremes. Even in science, maybe especially in science, we don't get absolute proof of the kind that we get in mathematics. So you can get in mathematics where you start with a certain axiom and then you make a series of deductions from that using deductive logic. You don't get that kind of argument. Science isn't built on that type of logical structure. So science is always provisional. But we can have very good reasons for thinking things or believing things based on scientific evidence that we find. And I think the proofs for God, or the arguments rather, for God's existence are of that kind. They have strong provisional weight. They're like in a courtroom where you're beyond reasonable doubt based on what we know. So the two extremes are fideism, where we have no rational basis for faith, or rationalism with the claim that we can have absolute certainty about belief in God. And the middle way, I think, is this idea of what I call we can make an inference to the best explanation. We have strong provisional evidence and arguments in support of belief in God. And so I think from a rational standpoint, as an intellectual, when I am asked, does belief in God make sense? I would say, yes, it makes sense in that sense. I think we have strong reasons for faith, but not absolute proof. So that's the first part. And then just experientially.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't think this is unique to people who have religious belief, but one of the things that the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament talk about is the role of the Spirit of God, or the Holy Spirit, that what is objectively real in history is made subjectively real or confirmed subjectively by the testimony of the Holy Spirit. That's something that I have experienced in different ways, and so I have an inner confidence about my faith in God.
Right. Well, how have you experienced it, though?
I have heard non-audible voices, the things I don't hear audibly, but words that come into my head that I am immediately aware are not generated by my own thought processes.
How can you be sure?
Can't be sure. Except,
why do you believe that?
Well,
because the imagination is so fertile.
It is fertile, Joe. And so you have to test these things. But I've had this only happened to me a few times, but they've been words of guidance about the direction that my life is going to take or needs to take. And they have guided choices that I've made, and they were very distinct, very strong. And when I've developed almost a sense of humor about it. I've learned over time. I mean, I overthought everything as a young person, going back to like everybody. Yeah. And so I used to be really annoyed at these Christians who would say, God told me, what on earth are you talking about? I mean, I can look at the biblical witness, I can compare it to the historical evidence, I can look at these things we've been talking about in science. But what are you saying, God told me? But I think there is an experience that many people have over time walking in faith, where they begin to recognize the voice of God in their own life in a more personal way. And for me, sometimes it's been with a sort of double entendre, where there's a passage of the Bible to which I've been drawn for some, maybe something of completely random reason, but at a particular time where I realize, oh, that's kind of funny. That has a direct application to this situation that I'm in. And then I find that, sure enough, that was actually insight or guidance into what I was about to experience.
But people have gotten that from philosophy as well. They've gotten ancient philosophy.
And again, I'm not making any argument on the basis of this.
But you were talking about an experience with God.
I've had,
Do you think that qualifies as an experience with God? I mean, isn't that just a human moment relating to the revelations and things that other human beings have discovered? And as a human, we are constantly absorbing the ideas and the revelations and the observations of all of us, of what we've learned about the human experience, what we've learned about how our own unique biology interacts with the world around us, how we can relate to that. It's not that alone in itself is not an experience with God.
I agree with all that. And because this is what I'm relating are subjective experiences, I would not place any weight on them in trying to persuade anyone else of the existence or reality of God. That's why I wrote the book I did in a completely different vein, on the basis of objective evidence.
What religion do you study, if you don't mind me asking?
It's not so much. I'm a Christian.
You're a Christian?
Yeah, I'm a Christian.
Right.
Here, I'll give you the thing that I first experienced upon my Christian conversion was an experience of peace that I'd never had before, and an experience of outward-focused love and concern for other people that was completely and is completely contrary to all my natural inclinations.